In my last video talking about how I made over $1,000 a month for my Unturned server, many of you have reached out to me asking for what my blueprint is on how to make an Unturned server. Well, most servers fail in their first month, which can be especially distressing after putting in so much effort, time, and money. I know, because I have failed more than twice myself, and it can be absolutely crushing. In order to do this, I will be covering the 4 pillars, which are the 4 different key categories which will help ensure your server success. These 4 categories include community, staff and management, content and updates, and monetization. Each of these categories will cover the broad strokes, which will help ensure your success for your server. Let's start with the foundation, which will make and break your server. Community is your server's lifeblood. It makes up your players, both in-game and in services like Discord. While each community is distinct, there are many basic components that can apply to almost every community. So I've broken it down into 3 core areas that can make or break player retention. Without further ado, guys, the first section for community is events. Events are simply contests hosted by staff where players can compete to win rewards. Generally, I recommend for these type of situations is that you should do at least 3 to 4 events per week. If you're a smaller server, Friday, Saturday, Sunday works pretty well. Or if you're a bigger server, doing it up to every single day also works. It's important to understand though that you should never do events if you're doing it solely just to keep player count up. Don't do events if people only join your server just for the events. Other important things to understand is that staff participation can cause friction. Obviously, it's up to your best judgment, but certain events, if staff do really well, such as in scavenger hunts, people will accuse you of cheating. Other things to understand about events is that it's really highly recommended to have preparation built beforehand with event areas outside the map, either with map editor or built with Unturned tools to help streamline the process. With rewards, you want to make sure they're enticing, unique, and exclusive. Better yet, keep track of every single time and how many of these items are given out to help reduce overusage, and also potentially figure out if a staff member is spawning them in and giving them away. Some event ideas are scavenger hunts, hide and seek, PvP tournaments, Simon Says, and Juggernaut event. Alright, well, let's move on to the next topic. For the next section, we have ban minimization, which is a certain ideology that we have on our server where effectively we work towards reducing the amount of bans we have to give by making it effectively impossible to break rules. We did this by making mic spam solutions towards muting them, making it impossible to view their mic spam instead of banning them. We had safe zone shooting where we removed the ability for them to gun spam in safe zone, so we didn't need to ban them for that. We also got rid of safe zone camping by making safe zone outside the map and requiring a command to leave. And basically the idea is, instead of trying to always just enforce rules with staff all the time, is to basically focus on solutions to these problems that make it so that they can continue to play the server, but not able to break the rules and cause problems, which will help ensure higher player count, even if they're not the best players. For the last section of this chapter, we have Discord integration. Now, Discord here is meant to refer to the social media platform that many of you probably already use today. It's a very useful tool that can help boost your player engagement and retention. Some of these tools can include things like bots that can be used to showcase player activity and playtime, or notify players when base raids are occurring. It also is generally used for server status and player count checkers. Other things you can use Discord for are things like giveaways, which I highly recommend making these giveaways tied to playtime on players to ensure that they have to actually play your server in order to qualify, and then potentially consider giving away either real money, ranks, or even going on a service like G2A and buying a game key for something that you think that your player base will like and giving that away, which reduces the amount of money you have to spend and maximizes the value. Or things like the trading channel, which you can use for players to encourage them to do trading and selling in your Discord simply without having to wait for somebody to get on. Or suggestion channels, which can be used to obviously allow your players to have a place to discuss different ideas they have, or suggestions, criticisms, all different types of things. Very useful, but it also allows you to engage them directly, which if you have a suggestion channel, I highly recommend, if it's a good suggestion, that you directly respond and give feedback for people's suggestions or criticism. Don't leave them hanging. Make them feel wanted and make them feel engaged. Overall, your Discord should become a core part of your server's experience. It should be something that players want to join, as it should be a place for your community to congregate and enjoy themselves, while also becoming part of a bigger conglomerate. Now, these were only a few things to help you get the way along the way, but there's many other options you can do to make your Discord be a new place to congregate for your community. Without further ado, let's move on to the next chapter. For chapter 2, we have staff and management. Staff can make or break your server. They are the most critical aspect of your server by keeping order and maintaining events and other critical functions of your server. Most owners get this completely wrong, which leads to many horrible situations or outcomes that lead to the death of their server. Today, we'll be covering 3 critical areas in this chapter that can help prevent 90% of your staff drama. Your staff, again, are your biggest asset, or your biggest liability. Without further ado, let's get into subsection number 1. For this first section of this chapter, we have staff or players 2. Now, what this is generally meant to refer to is that staff always start out usually as players, and most of the time they're volunteers and are not paid. Now, what I want to do with this section is say that you should not make staff just be staff. They should also be able to play the server and be able to connect with your community and be there. You want players to appreciate staff being there, and make sure that obviously staff are happy, and making them only do work and not disallow them from being able to play the server separately from work will generally refer to them to being unhappy and increase your turnover rates and make them leave, or worse, lead to them abusing while on duty because they can't do anything else. What you generally want to do is make sure that your staff are able to stay for long, be happy especially, and make it so that, well, they enjoy the experience. And maybe if you're lucky, if you have a staff member that stays for long enough, they'll maybe be able to move up to being a manager. Generally, the main thing with being staff here is that you want to make sure that you're relationship focused and make sure that they are happy and working well. Without further ado, let's move on. For our next section, we have abuse minimization. Now, abuse minimization is very similar to ban minimization in that effectively it is the same thing. Effectively, what you want to do is make it almost impossible to get away with abusing, or effectively make it impossible. It's a philosophy that I generally carried, and many of our staff managers who worked for us, Kronos, basically use this strategy to be able to make things far more difficult and stable for us. We would do this by utilizing different services. For example, the Discord Hook plugin, which allows us to track certain commands like /I or /vehicle, and it also allows us to make an automatic paper trail to track staff members and ensure that they're not using these commands in ways they're not supposed to. But we also incorporated special plugins that allowed us to track what was being changed when they used inspect plugins to look inside of people's storages. If they edited, we would know. If they added, we would know. Or what they trashed or added to vaults to see if they were stealing items when wiping bases, for example. But this also applies to things like /duty, which forces player staff to go on duty whenever they want to use admin commands or other commands of their rank. Make sure that players can see that, oh hey, they're not on duty while PvPing, they can't use commands. It allows them to be provably fair. Though, unfortunately, there is some limitations in /duty. Obviously, Shift F7, which allows you to see players with an effective no-clip ability, can stay on even if you go off duty, which is kind of an oversight, I think, but can't really do anything about that. Overall, this strategy is very, very useful for helping you minimize the amount of work you have to do as management to track your staff, and, well, it's just a good approach. Anyway, let's move on to the next section. For this last subsection of the chapter, we have management. Now, generally, management can be different depending on what server you're running and based on a lot of different factors of who you have and what you don't have. But generally, the key points I want to say about management are pretty simple. 1, if you are able to and you're making money, pay your managers. They do a lot of work, and if not, why do you have managers? Keep them happy, obviously. You don't want people betraying you and all that, which honestly is terrible. Don't ever happen, please. And you want to make sure that you show that you value their work, offer perks if available, or whatever it takes to make them happy and content with how things are working. Now, other things, minimize management positions. If they're not doing anything, or they're just there, don't have them. Only trusted and beneficial people who actually do things should be in management position. Too many management positions will obviously not be good, even if they're all great, obviously, because there's only so much work that can be done. You want to reduce your betrayal risk or other potential things from happening. You also want to prevent some do all the work situations as well. Quality over quantity always. If you have a lot of people that are quality, go on case-by-case basis and figure out how you want to manage that. Not everyone needs to be management, but you want to make sure that you optimize things correctly here. Chapter 3, which focuses on content updates, mainly is going to focus on things that you should and shouldn't do. So, without further ado, let's get on to subsection number 1. For the first subsection, we have smart spending and cost cutting. Now, obviously, you want to do this in your server as much as possible. Now, there are a few strategies that I highly recommend. One, if you see some mods in the workshop that you might want to use, it doesn't hurt to always reach out to them either in this comment section or directly of the mod page and ask them if you can have permission to re-upload it and edit it. Now, it usually won't work, but if it does, it'll allow you to save some money on content that, while you can't really monetize most of the time, you'll be able to utilize it in your server and save you the trouble of having to get it commissioned separately. Another thing is that I obviously recommend that you focus on impactful updates that generally add in content and improve the experience. You don't want to do very frequent updates that don't make meaningful changes. You want to target actual player pain points where they want new things, but they don't already have it. For me, I've obviously fallen into the trap that I spent a ton of money on updates that looked cool but didn't really improve the player experience, wasting hundreds of thousands, well, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of dollars on things that didn't really matter over the years. And keep in mind, guys, that player counts tend to stay flat despite flashy additions. Unless you're adding something absolutely spectacular, you're not going to be getting anything crazy. And even if you do add something spectacular, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get more players. It might help you maintain those players, but you got to be careful. Learn to prioritize function over flashiness. For this next subsection, we have DIY content creation. Now, what this generally refers to is that if you are able, the cheapest way to make content is to learn to create it yourself. Now, this isn't always easy, and a lot of people struggle with this, but this can obviously apply to map making or Blender workshop items, or if you're really talented, plugin creation and modifications of existing plugins. Now, obviously, this is more of a long-term thing, but with how centralized and very niche Unturned is with a lot of these communities, the prices tend to go up, and this is especially so in plugin development, where a lot of plugin developers charge an absurd amount of money for their plugins. And these skills over time can very much save you a lot of money, whether it's you making it or one of your managers making it. Finding somebody that you can have in-house to make these kinds of things will save you a lot of money in the long term. So this is something that you should highly prioritize if you have the opportunity to hire somebody or bring somebody on who has these skills. However, again, I caution you that do not get over-reliant on people who bring these skills, as they can and often will have these advantages over you if you aren't careful. For the last subsection, we have always secure your assets. Now, this is generally referring to the fact that when you're spending money on content, whether it's plugins or mods, you should secure the content you get, whether that be the source code or the original Blender files of the content you get. Now, the reason you want to get these content is that you want to be able to modify it later on if you need to. If you lose access to this developer or some other reason you maybe want to use a different person to do updates to it, you still have it and it's yours. Now, it's important that you negotiate for these files beforehand. A lot of modders or plugin developers will potentially ask for more money if you do ask for this. So keep that in mind whenever you're commissioning, as it might increase your costs. However, if a lot of developers, specifically mod developers, are more okay with this, though plugin developers are a lot more stingy about giving plugin source code, as, well, it's code and they can usually use it, resell it, or whatever. So it's a little bit different there. So be mindful that some plugin developers might take offense if you do ask for source code, so just keep that in mind whenever you're asking for it. It's up to you, but saving a little bit of money is not worth it if you're not going to be able to edit it in the long term. For this last chapter, we have monetization. Simply that monetization is very important. Enough so that I believe that it should get its own in-depth video in the future, depending on if you guys are interested in that. So I will keep this chapter a little bit shorter than the other ones and provide a few key tips and insights and save the rest of things that I could say about it for a future video. So first, monetization should always be prioritized last in regards to server development. This is pretty simple. If you don't have the players, and doing more for monetization isn't going to help you with that. You always want to make sure that your players are happy and you have enough players that having a monetization store that you're working more on is actually going to sell. Don't hesitate to rework ranks if they become too strong or too weak if you have them. It doesn't hurt. Obviously, people will get upset if you change things a lot, but you should never hesitate to change them as long as you're not removing them. You should always seek out a means to create a benefit to normal players through pay-to-win content. I think the best example that a lot of servers have is that rank kits, usually which are pretty weak, can very stimulate PvP with people coming back with ranks kits all the time. Can be really helpful for motivating PvP and giving more loot for players. Other things that include here are that you should focus on pay-to-win content that can be purchased multiple times by big spenders while not creating balance issues. You shouldn't be afraid to try unique store content that plays well with your server specifically. I know Hydro did bundles with our non-drop armors that we didn't have because we're using drop armors for our PvP server, which allowed us to sell something that was a little bit more unique. Obviously, most servers don't try new things, but if you have something you think might work, you should see how it works and see if people like it or not. And finally, you should always make sure to follow the monetization rules for the game you are running your server on. Now, I made a video in the past talking about how I felt about the monetization changes from Nelson, but generally, you should follow those so you don't get in trouble. Alright, so that's all the things I have to talk about for today for how I made my server successful. Now, there definitely is probably a lot of other things I could talk about, but these are just some general points in this 4 easy to digest chapters for you guys to listen to. Now, if you guys have any questions about server ownership or asking for anything you might need or want to know, feel free to ask in the comments. I really appreciate you guys, and yeah. Well, I will see you guys next time. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe. Don't do it if you don't like me, of course. And yeah.